process of development. You have to go, for example, in the Young Lords, you had to go through a process. You went through the process of being a friend of the Lord's, where you showed your level of commitment. There were certain responsibilities you had as a friend of the Lord's. You took that responsibility on and you proved yourself worthy, you became a Young Lord. And as a Young Lord, because the Young Lords Party was organized and structured in such a way where information would filter from the top down and from the bottom up to be able to make decisions that would be beneficial for the community, because the goal was that we wanted to end the oppression. We wanted to end the oppression, whether it was the oppression that was seen in the Southeast Bronx when landlords were burning buildings and leaving people homeless, or the oppression of the police whenever you wanted to protest an abusive event, and they would come down. I witnessed at 16 years old a pregnant woman being thrown off a roof in the Southeast Bronx by 2 police officers. I lived that. I also lived seeing events in my mother's workplace that were abusive. For example, a woman would get a machine stuck in her hand and she was told by the boss to clean it up and keep on working. And as a translator, I'm observing and looking at all of this. So when we talk about oppression, it's not oppression in the ideas, it's oppression that you lived, that you saw. The addiction of heroin, which was rampant in most ghettos in New York City and in America. And now we see it today in the suburbs, where they're pushing heroin all over the place in the suburbs. And where working people live. They buy their little houses and they try to struggle to maintain them. And now drugs are being introduced to their children, so their children become immobile. Because there's also politics behind what drugs are being pushed when. When they wanted to do more for less, cocaine became very popular. Because while you're on cocaine, you can work the job of 2 or 3 until you drop. When they didn't want civil rights movement, they didn't want anybody to protest and fight for their civil rights, to fight against racism, segregation, heroin was the popular choice of drug. Now they're talking about pushing some kind of marijuana, synthetic marijuana, so that your minds could get destroyed and you can't do anything. And coming back to what Carlos said, it's really important to be mindful about what you're being fed ideologically, as well as what you're being fed in terms of food, in terms of alcohol, in terms of drugs, because the best way to immobilize you is to immobilize your mind, which is why there's an attack in the poor neighborhoods to close down schools. Every school, if you really look at, who has not passed, quote unquote, the guidelines for the Board of Education, are schools in very impoverished neighborhoods. That's really important to note, because you got young people developing where they're going to go, what are they going to do. There's also something to look at with regards to then and now. The prison system has expanded much more than it was when we were growing up. Why? And who are filling them up? And why are they filling them up? They're talking about privatizing. Privatizing prisons, which means free slavery. Those are things we got to look at. We look at the atmosphere today of hatred, of wanting to roll back everything that we fought for, that people before us fought for. Because the civil rights movement didn't start when I was a little girl in the Southeast Bronx. That movement started way before me. And people lived and died for that movement. And in the last, how many years, since Bush administration, since Obama's administration, they haven't signed the Civil Liberties Act. It's still up there in the air. And now we see how the government is pushing to take away more of your rights. Education should be free. It should be free because a mind that's educated is a mind that makes wise choices. A mind that's educated, and I'm not saying just stick with the books, because I left high school at 16 to work to help my mother. No, at 15 to work for my mother. Actually, I was doing that at 13. And I left high school with a 6th grade reading level, because at that time racism was so blatant that the teachers would sit there with a newspaper and say, I don't have to teach you niggas and spics. I'm tenure. I'm not losing my job. But that's my son and his children.
Sharon, wait.
So what was I?
You were in the schools?
About education and how there was a
Newspaper.
Yes. We can't afford to have that happen. We cannot afford to have segregation come back. We cannot afford to have disparity in education. Every child should be educated equally in America. Every child. Not charter schools, but a broad, equal distribution of funds and resources so that you can get what you need. The young lords fought for lead testing, for TB testing, issues that were affecting the community at that time. In order to help people to come together and bring people in to look at what was happening. We studied books on culture, on history, on politics. We studied Mao, Engels, Lenin, Marx. We studied, what other books did we study? We studied a whole bunch of stuff in order to be able to assess what it is that we need to do. And we developed a 13-point program. And in our program, we set out what we were going to be working towards. Now, I am still of the mindset, and you can disagree, that socialism is a must. And I'm not saying oppression as the quote-unquote status quo government says that socialism is, because socialism, as we're told, is not necessarily what it is. Whenever the oppressor doesn't want you to know something, they exacerbate it, they tell you alternative facts, so that you will be against even looking at the situation, which is why Trump supporters will not even consider looking at the situation from a different venue.
Well, there's a very, very simple formula, and I love using this formula with the types of Trumps and etc., etc. There isn't really that much difference between what is socialism and what is capitalism. It's fundamentally the same thing. You have profits that are derived from people working. The difference is a small little detail that makes all the differences in the world. And that is what happens with the profits. It's that simple. What happens with the profits? Do they go into the coffers of one individual or groupings of individuals? Or are the profits used to build schools, to build housing, to build hospitals? That's the difference. It's not complicated. It's not complicated the way that these institutions like to present it to you, to attack any mass aspirations for a better world. You see, because they like to instill the idea that this is it. That we don't need to go any further. And that is not true. Human civilization has gone through millenniums of seeking what is best for humanity. And there is no limitations to what is best. Humanity right now is at its most primitive stage, you know. It was in the last 200 years that people started accepting that men and women are equals, objectively speaking, that the races are equal, you know, that diseases can be conquered. You know, you spoke about heart transplant 200 years ago. They look at you like you were whacked out, okay? And in medicine, anything is possible. So if anything is possible in medicine, imagine how else science can be applied. And that is the reason why in our 13-point program and platform, we stated it without any apology. We want a socialist society.
But because even if you look at, yeah, we're going to open it up, but I wanted just to bring it to something. Primitive communalism was a way of life in the beginning of time. Everybody worked and everybody benefited from that work. It wasn't privatized. It wasn't one individual gets everything, or I'm going to use one individual to get for myself. And that's something that we need to consider. If our tribal people were able to sustain themselves and survive difficult times, because we weren't as sophisticated as we are now, where we can, at the drop of a hat, get a computer and open it up and see what's happening on the other side of the world. It's something to think about, and I say this because I'm always open to agree to disagree with people, and I'm always open to listen and learn something new. And I welcome you to do the same.